At the beginning of the story, we are introduced to a British man named French Martin who was with his friend. It is known that Martin has a martial arts place in a small town in America. Unfortunately, the place is currently deserted, making Martin to got financial problems. Shortly, seen three mafia people who were walking towards Martin's martial arts place. It turns out that the purpose of their arrival is to buy the martial arts place. But Martin firmly refused, even though the state of his martial arts place was now empty of visitors. While they were talking, these people even climbed onto the exercise mat without taking off their shoes. Suddenly, this made Martin so very annoyed. In the end, Martin challenged them to a 3-on-1 fight. If they could beat Martin, then he was willing to sell his martial arts place. But if they lost, then they had to leave and never come back again. Hearing the challenge, the three of them agreed. Then there was a fight. With Martin's skills, he didn't seem to have much trouble beating the three of them. In fact, they were knocked faint for several hours. In short order, when the three people woke up, they hurriedly left Martin's martial arts center and promised not to bother him again. The next day, Martin went to the office of his friend named Alex. It is known that Alex is a debt collector. Martin, who was having economic difficulties, asked Alex to take him to work as a debt collector. At first, Alex refused because the job was so very dangerous. But Martin explained that he really needed a job right now, considering that the martial arts place he managed was now empty. With a little force, Alex finally gave him the business card of his boss, who could take Martin to become a debt collector. When Martin returned to his rent house, it turned out that he always went through the back door, because Martin had been waiting for his rent house for 3 months. Long story short, Martin met Alex's boss named Tommy. Tommy, who already knew Martin's intention of wanting to work, then asked about Martin's background. Martin explained that he was a former British Special Forces officer who had been assigned to the battlefield for a long time, plus he was also very good at jiu-jitsu martial arts. Hearing Martin's pretty cool background, Tommy immediately accepted Martin to work with him. Then Tommy said that Martin would work together with one of his men. Now Martin is officially a debt collector. The next morning, after getting data on the people to be collected, Martin also met Tommy's men, who would become his work partners. And the partner is named Sue. Then Martin pulled out a paper listing the names of the customers they were going to bill. The first person on the list was Oliver. It was also known that next to the list of names, there was a number ranking, and for Oliver, this was given a rank of 10. After that, the two of them rushed to Oliver's home. It was explained a little that the ranking was the level of difficulty when collecting debt, starting from rank 10, which is the easiest part, to rank 1, which is the most difficult part. Once there, they kindly knocked on Oliver's door. Oliver himself turned out to be very scared after finding out that his house had Sue, which meant that Sue was quite notorious among the customers. Then Oliver and one of his male friends took a gun and hid in the back door. Meanwhile, Oliver's female friend was asked to open the front door and not let Sue and Martin inside. But just as the female friend opened the door, Sue suddenly broke it down. Because the plan failed, Oliver and his friend tried to escape through the back door. Martin, who was a rookie, immediately chased him by running, while Sue chased Oliver by car, until finally Oliver's friend was able to be overthrown by Martin with Sue's help. On the other hand, Oliver himself stole a car, and then he ran away. But fortunately, Martin could stop Oliver. Since Oliver is a rank 10, Sue and Martin just need to teach him a lesson, so that Oliver doesn't default on his installments again. Sue also said that Oliver must pay his debt no more than 5 days from now. After that, they both proceeded to collect the next customer. This time the person they will collect is Harvey, who has a debt of $300,000. Harvey also has a ranking of 5, which means it will be more difficult than collecting Oliver earlier. Here, Martin was complaining, because the rank 10 who was the easiest to collect almost killed him with a gunshot and dragged him by car. In short, Sue and Martin enter Harvey's office. There, they both ask one of the employees for Harvey's whereabouts. At the same time, a big tall man who is Harvey's bodyguard arrives. Sue tells Martin to fight the bodyguard, and a fight ensues. While Martin was fighting, Sue went inside until he met Harvey and immediately taught him. Then Sue also tied Harvey's legs on the table. Soon came the bodyguard's friend who wanted to help defeat Martin. But in the end, the two bodyguards were defeated. Then Harvey wanted to bribe them, both by paying half of the debt, as long as he wasn't charged and paid again. But because Sue and Martin were good employees, of course they refused the bribe. Then because Harvey was ranked 5th, Harvey's leg had to be broken. Long story short, when Sue and Martin are in the car, Martin complained again about what he had just experienced. Sue, who heard the babble, he showed a poster with a picture of himself. Sue said that he used to be an actor, but because Sue had gone bankrupt, he was no choice to become a debt collector and never complained. Then his next task was to collect from someone named Gordon. It is known that Gordon has a second rank, which means it will be more difficult than before. Upon arriving at Gordon's place, Sue gave orders by saying, "Make the atmosphere more intense, then take the money." Then they met Gordon's men, who looked very burly. In accordance with the word of command, Martin deliberately provoked emotions that made Gordon's men angry until a fight broke out. Sue himself immediately went inside to meet Gordon, who happened to be with his girlfriend at the time. Without further ado, Sue immediately asked Gordon to pay his debt of $40,000. At the same time, Martin arrived, who had apparently defeated Gordon's men. Then Sue immediately told Martin to take Gordon to his safe room to get the money Gordon had borrowed. Here, Gordon had wanted to bribe Martin, but Martin refused and only wanted Gordon to pay his debt. But because Gordon continued to babble, Martin beat Gordon. Then Martin found a lot of money in Gordon's safe, even though the debt is only $40,000, which means Gordon doesn't intend to pay. On the other hand, Gordon's girlfriend invited Sue to have fun. Sue agreed to do it. In short, they had left Gordon's house with the bill they had gotten, and they were going home to their respective homes. But on the way home, they were suddenly stopped by Gordon's men and their friends. At that moment, Sue and Martin came out to fight them. After a long fight, in the end, they were overthrown by Sue and Martin. The next day, Martin was invited by Sue to a bar where beautiful women danced. Then they both entered the room, which turned out to be the bar owned by Tommy, their boss. Here Sue immediately handed over yesterday's bill to Tommy. It seems that Tommy is very satisfied with the performance of Sue and Martin. Tommy even told them that Harvey, the man who broke his leg, has now paid off all his debts. After that, Tommy invites them both to go meet someone because there is a very lucrative job. Hearing this, Sue and Martin were of course happy to go with Tommy. In short, the three of them arrived at their destination. They were immediately greeted by a woman named Amanda. Then they were invited inside and met the person they meant, the person named Barbosa. Then Amanda, who turned out to be Barbosa's girlfriend, immediately told the women there to leave. After that, Barbosa explained that he wanted to arrest an Irish man named Connor, because Connor had stolen his money when Connor was still Barbosa's men. Tommy, who heard this, immediately explained about his ranking system. Rank 10 was only given a warning, Rank 5 had his leg broken, and Rank 1 was beaten to death. Without hesitation, Barbosa wanted Rank 1, and he was also willing to pay for the job. After mutual agreement, Barbosa gave him an address, which was the Connor's last workplace. Later that day, Sue and Martin rushed to find Connor's whereabouts. After driving quite far, they finally arrived at the address given by Barbosa. It turned out to be a bar on the outskirts of town. Then they went inside and met the bar owner. The bar owner said that today was a holiday and the bar was now closed. Then the bar owner also immediately kicked Sue and Martin out of his place. But what Sue did was slam him to the floor. When Sue wanted to interrogate him, suddenly a bar employee appeared, who was a criminal. As a result, Martin had to face his employee, while Sue would continue to interrogate. Sue asked where the Irish man named Connor was. However, the bar owner didn't want to tell, and only said that Connor had stopped working from 3 months ago. Meanwhile, Martin is seen who continues to duel, until finally Martin could beat him. Then Martin and Sue threatened to kill the bar owner if he continued to choose silence. The bar owner, who couldn't hold it, finally said that one of Connor's friends named Tim must know where Connor was now. The bar owner also told Tim's address to the two of them. In short, Sue and Martin went straight to Tim's house. Upon arrival, Sue immediately beat one of them to ask who Tim was. It turns out that this is Tim, who is one of Connor's best friends. After that, Sue and Martin said that they came here to find an Irish man named Connor. Hearing Connor's name, Tim realized that the person who had sent Sue and Martin must be Barbossa. Tim also explained that Connor was the good guy, while the bad guy was Barbossa. Even now, Connor is taking care of a small child by himself. But Martin and Sue didn't want to listen because all they knew was that Connor stole Barbossa's money. After Tim was pressed, he finally said that Connor was now with a woman named Sandy and lived in a village. Immediately, they both rushed to find Sandy. Upon arrival, Martin knocked politely on her door. But when it was opened, Martin immediately beat the person. Not long after, a woman came out, which was Sandy, the person they were looking for. Sue immediately asked rudely where Connor was, but Martin asked Sue not to be rude to a woman. Finally, Sue asked gently where Connor was, but unexpectedly, Sandy spat at him. Upset with Sandy's attitude, Sue immediately slapped Sandy. Martin again asked Sue to calm down and not be rude to women, but Martin also got a kick right in his genitals. Then Sandy said that Connor was a good person who never hurt anyone. But Martin and Sue didn't want to listen because all they knew was that Connor was the one who stole Barbossa's money. After that, Sandy was threatened several times until finally, Sandy said that the person who knew Connor's whereabouts was Amanda. After getting this information, they went back to their respective homes and would continue this work the next day. On the next day, Martin and Sue were already in front of Barbossa's house to stake out Amanda. While waiting for Amanda to come out, Martin asked Sue why Sue was so strong as a debt collector for decades, while he who had only been working for a few days was already like a crazy person. Sue explained that he worked like this after his daughter died of leukemia, while his wife just left Sue. Since then, Sue's heart rarely feels calm, so he likes to take out the anger on the customers. Not long after, Amanda was seen leaving the place in a car. Immediately, Sue and Martin followed Amanda wherever she went. After following Amanda for several hours, Amanda finally got out of the car and walked to an apartment. But because the apartment door never opened, Amanda had said the Irish word that is shit. Amanda also said that she was the only one who could save him. Hearing the screams, Martin and Sue are now convinced that Connor must be living in the apartment. As Amanda wanted to return to her car, she was immediately intercepted by Sue and Martin. Here, they ask Amanda the number of the apartment Connor lives in. If Amanda didn't tell them, they promised to report this to Barbossa. Amanda, who was afraid of being reported, finally told Connor's apartment number to Sue and Martin. In short order, Sue and Martin could get into the apartment and met with Connor, until quickly Sue beat Connor. When Connor wanted to be beaten relentlessly, a girl who was Connor's daughter suddenly appeared. Connor, not wanting to make his daughter afraid or sad, told the little girl that Martin and Sue were his friends. Sue, who had also lost a child, understood Connor's feelings. Sue told the girl that they were friends, and now Sue wanted to play hide and seek. Sue then told the girl to hide immediately. Afterwards, Sue asked what Connor's problem with Barbossa was. Here Connor told him everything. In the past, he was a worker at Barbossa's nightclub. At that time, Connor fell in love and dated a dancer at the nightclub named Trista. One day, Trista became pregnant with Connor's baby and decided to quit her job. But unbeknownst to anyone, Barbossa also liked Trista. When Barbossa found out that Trista was pregnant with Connor, Barbossa stabbed Trista. Trista was rushed to the hospital, but her life wasn't saved. Meanwhile, the baby in Trista's womb was saved, the little girl we saw earlier named Lainey. Hearing all this, Sue and Martin couldn't bear to give Connor to Barbossa. Because if Connor is still taken, then Barbossa will definitely finish Connor and his daughter. In the end, Sue and Martin told Connor to take his daughter as far away as possible right now. After that, Sue and Martin hurried to leave the room, but just as they want to leave, they met Amanda again. Here, Amanda says that Barbossa and his men are heading to Connor's room via the elevator, Apparently, Barbosa was going to finish off Connor and his daughter, and then blamed the murder on Sue and Martin. Hearing this, Sue and Martin realized that they were being set up by Barbosa. Then they both returned to Connor's room to save him. When they arrived upstairs, there were already a lot of Barbosa's men surrounding Connor's room. Sue was hesitant to fight back, but Martin convinced Sue that what they were doing was right. In the end, the two of them began to knock out Barbosa's men one by one. Then Martin saw Alex, who turned out to be a traitor. When Alex wanted to finish off Martin and Sue, Sue quickly finished him off first. Then they both went into Connor's room. Here, Martin told Connor and his daughter to leave immediately through the back door, while Martin and Sue would fight Barbosa's men. Shortly after, some of Barbosa's men entered, but they were immediately finished off. Unfortunately, on one occasion, Sue was also shot by another of Barbosa's men, leaving Sue dead. Meanwhile, with his rest of strength, Martin fought them until he was able to finish off some of Barbosa's men. However, Martin was also shot several times, so Martin decided to leave the place. After that, Martin showed Barbosa and one of his men who planned to scapegoat Sue for all this mess, but at the same time, Tommy arrives with a hired thug. Tommy, who already knew that Barbosa had betrayed him, didn't hesitate to finish Barbosa off. Not long after, the police arrived at the scene because got report from Amanda. Meanwhile, Martin tries to get away from there in his car, although Martin's condition is now starting to dying. A few months later, Connor and his daughter were seen having dinner together in Ireland. Now they are both living peacefully after Barbosa was killed. The scene moves to 1 year after the incident. Then we are shown with a group of criminals who want to fight in a bar. Until the thugs accidentally interrupted the lunch of a man named French Martin. It turns out that Martin now works as a barkeeper at the place. Martin immediately tried to break them up. But unfortunately, here, Martin was even made fun of and challenged. Actually, the bar owner asked Martin not to fight back, but Martin, who was already angry, immediately beat them. Martin, who is a former British Special Forces, can easily defeat these thugs. After the incident, because a lot of property was damaged, the bar owner was angry with Martin. Until finally the bar owner was no choice to fire Martin. Then when Martin came out of the bar, he was surprised because Sue was still alive. Even though in the previous incident, Sue got several shots from Barbosa's men. Then the two of them decided to chat in a cafe. Here, the curious Martin asked why Sue was still alive. Sue replied that Tommy had saved him. Sue explained about Sue's intentions and goals for Martin, which Sue wanted to invite Martin to become a debt collector again. Martin, who was still traumatized by his previous job, immediately refused. But Sue continued to persuade Martin by saying that this time the job was only collecting 3 people, plus the wages paid by his boss were also very large. Martin, who happened to be still on financial problems, was finally no choice want to work again as a debt collector for the mafia. Then, that day they went to do their job. While in the parking lot, Sue and Martin saw a suspicious black car. On the way, Sue gave them a list of people's bills. They would start collecting from the farthest place first. Then Sue told Martin about the first person they were going to bill. Her name was Mal Reese, a Ukrainian female mobster who was famous for her intelligence. Mal Reese is also a merciless killer who takes out her enemies. However, it is known that Mal Reese turned out to be Sue's ex-boyfriend in the past. Long story short, because their journey was very far, they had to stop for gas. But it turns out that the black car seen in the parking lot keeps following them. The curious Martin tried to approach the car, and apparently there were 2 black men in the car. But here the twins, let's call them with this, immediately pulled out firearms, so Martin, who didn't want to find trouble, immediately got back into his car and told Sue. Sue actually already knew that the twins were always following him, but Sue doesn't care about them and thinks that they might have been sent by his boss. After that, Sue and Martin continued their journey. In short, they had arrived at Mal Reese's club. Once inside, they were immediately greeted by Mal Reese's men, who took them to meet Mal Reese. Martin, who didn't want to mince words, immediately said that the 2 of them came to collect debts. However, Mal Reese had already prepared the money. When they want to continue their work, Martin asked why this was so easy, because previously Martin thought they would fight. Sue just replied that we'll see. Not long after, the car that the two of them were riding in was hit by the car behind it. It turned out to be Maurice's men. Of course, the goal of Maurice's men wanted to take back the money, until finally they hit each other. After successfully repelling Maurice's men, Martin slightly mocked Sue, because Sue's ear was hit by Bet's stick by a woman. Not long after, they were approached by the twins. The twins were amazed by Sue and Martin's battle. After the twins left, Martin invited Sue to rest by staying at a motel. At first, Sue refused, and he wanted to finish his job that day. But Martin kept insisting while saying that we are not robots until Sue finally gave in. While at the hotel, Sue calls his boss, Tommy. It turns out that Tommy is currently being held hostage by a group of people. Sue asks if Tommy is okay, and Tommy replies that Sue doesn't need to worry about him. Then Sue asks again about the black twins who always follow him. Tommy says that they were sent to keep an eye on Sue and Martin to prevent the bill from being taken away. Soon, Martin came with an alcohol drink for Sue, but Sue refused because he had long stopped drinking alcohol. The next day, they went back to work. When they arrived at their destination, Sue told them that the person they were going to bill was a man named Esteban Madrid, who owed them $100,000. It was also known that Madrid was the owner of a boxing club. But since the boxing club was still closed, Sue would take a nap, while Martin would buy coffee. Not long after, the boxing club was open. Then they both rushed inside to meet Esteban Madrid. Once inside, Sue beat the punching bag there while saying that he once won a boxing event. Then came Madrid's men, who told them both to leave immediately. But Martin said that he wanted to meet Esteban Madrid. This is Esteban Madrid, who is a famous boxing coach. Here, Sue and Martin immediately told him that their purpose in coming was to collect a debt. Madrid replied that he didn't know of any debts to anyone. He had been given money in the past, but it wasn't a debt, it was sponsorship money given to his top boxer. Hearing this, Sue and Martin didn't care, because they were only assigned to return the money. Not long after, Madrid's flagship boxer named Sugar. Sugar said that if Sue and Martin wanted the money, one of them had to compete in the boxing ring with him. Hearing the challenge, Martin immediately told Sue to accept his challenge, because earlier Sue had said that he had won a boxing event. Reluctantly, Sue had to fight Sugar, Esteban Madrid's favorite boxer. But unfortunately, just before they fought, Sue was immediately defeated. After that, Martin challenged Sugar to fight only with him, because Sue was too old and didn't deserve to be Sugar's opponent. In short, Martin, who wasn't used to boxing fights, was often hit, but occasionally retaliated, until finally using his feet to attack Sugar. Then Martin pretended to apologize, until finally Martin kicked him back and broke Sugar's hand. After breaking Sugar's hand, Sugar felt cheated and his friends immediately climbed into the ring to gang up on Martin. Madrid approached them with a gun, but luckily it was grabbed by Sue. Sue pointed a gun at the people there to stop beating Martin. In the end, Esteban Madrid gave up and wanted to pay his debt. Sue and Martin left the place in a hurry. After a few hours of driving, they got off to rest at a restaurant. They were approached by the twins, who praised them for completing their second task well. Martin asked the twins who they worked for, and the twins replied that they worked for someone named Molly X Sue, and Martin wondered who Molly X is, but they don't want to say. Later, Sue goes to the telephone exchange to call his boss, Tommy. Sue asks Tommy about someone named Molly X. Tommy replies that Molly X is Barbossa's brother, and that Molly X is now holding Tommy as a hostage. This means that Molly X is trying to get revenge on them for Barbossa's death. It is also known that all the people that Sue and Martin are charging now are the money that Barbossa once borrowed. Later, Molly X snatches his cell phone and says that he is in control. If they want Tommy to be free, they have to finish the job. Long story short, Sue and Martin continued their last job. But until this moment, Sue hasn't told Martin that Tommy is being held hostage. Upon their arrival at the destination, Sue said that the person they were going to bill was named Cyrus Skinner. They realized that the person they were going to face this time was a motorcycle gang. Not long after, the motorcycles left the place, until they had the opportunity to go inside. Before entering, Martin didn't forget to take a weapon just in case. When they were inside, it turned out that this place was just a motorcycle workshop and Cyrus was the owner. There, they met Cyrus workers who were welding the motorcycle. At that moment, Martin told him to call Cyrus immediately. Cyrus already knew that Sue and Martin would collect the debt, but he said that he had a debt to Barbossa and now Barbossa was dead, so his debt had also been paid off. Cyrus didn't want to pay them any money. Martin immediately pulled out a gun and threatened Cyrus. But Cyrus wasn't the least bit afraid and instead told him to shoot himself. Sue taught Cyrus all the way. Sue threatened that if Cyrus still didn't want to pay, he would make Cyrus suffer and even die in agony. Finally, Cyrus asked his employee to take the money from the safe. But after that, the employee ran away through the window. Seeing this, Sue immediately told Martin to catch the person, until there was a chase. In the end, Martin could catch the person. After getting the money, Martin came to see Sue. Cyrus said that if they handed over the money to Barbossa's brother, they would be killed immediately without getting anything in return. Martin seemed confused about what was really going on. In the end, Martin asked Sue to take the money away by splitting it in half. However, Sue felt indebted to Tommy. He still wanted to take all the money to save Tommy, even if he didn't get anything in return. Sue and Martin had a disagreement that led to a fight. Sue could kick Martin in the genitals, but Martin also responded by punching him in the genitals too. Then the twins got out of the car to take the money while intending to finish off Sue and Martin. However, Sue could grab his gun and finish off the twins. After the incident, Martin finally relented by handing over the money to Sue and left. Meanwhile, Sue will go to Molly X to save Tommy. Long story short, Sue arrived at Molly X's headquarters and offered all the money as long as Tommy was released. But Molly X doesn't want to do that because he wants to avenge Barbossa's death. Hearing this, Sue pointed a gun at one of Molly X's men. But unfortunately, he was taken down by stun gun. After that, Tommy and Sue will be tortured until they both die. Not long after, Martin appeared to intend to save them. Even Martin was assisted by Maurice's men. Then they gun each other's. Unfortunately, in this incident, Tommy had to die at the Molly X's hand. But finally, Molly X also died by Sue's hand. After the battle, Martin took Sue out and they were awaited by Maurice, who was ready to take them away. It is known that Martin made a deal with Maurice that all the money that had been collected would be divided in half with Maurice. Long story short, Tommy was buried. After that, Martin said that if anyone invited the two of them to work again as debt collectors, Sue replied that he had decided to retire. Until when Sue wanted to leave, he saw Martin's fancy and cool car, and he wanted to work again as long as the car was given to Sue. With this happy moment, then, the movie ended.